Wednesday. I want to talk to you about the importance of this hire and why I think it's the most important hire in the history of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'll do that here in just a second on the Wednesday edition of Locked on Jaguars.
You are Locked on Jags, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, man? Thank you for joining me today, making us your first listen here on Locked on Jaguars. I am your host of Locked on Jaguars, Tony Wiggins, and we appreciate you making us your first listen of the day because it's your team every day here on Locked on Jaguars, and we are proud to say that we're also free on all platforms. No charge. Just find Locked on Jaguars wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Hit the like button and subscribe. We got a good show for you today. Feeling a little bit better. Thank you all for bearing with us the last week or so as we've dealt with dealing with the coronavirus, COVID-19. But getting a little bit back on my feet just for some transparency things. It hit me a little bit rough. I have some pre-existing conditions that I have to be very, very careful of. So my recovery has been a little bit longer than those other people affected close to me. So I really do appreciate everyone sending me their well wishes. The Jaguars, though, their recovery from being in football purgatory is taking a lot longer than the fans would like it to. And we're back in that stage where, as you heard on my opening, that I said that this is the most important hire in the history of the franchise. At some point, we're going to want to have that be past tense. We're going to want to say that looking back, after a period of success, that boom, this was the most important hire of the team. Instead of looking at it every single year, we're saying that this is the next most important step, and this is the next most important step. And whenever you do that, that means you have to admit that you've had missteps and you've had things go wrong. So therefore, there's always this blue sky of improvement that you're looking for because you haven't gotten quite to where you want it to be. So right now, the Jags are in the middle of a coaching search. Many people believe they're also still in a hunt for a new general manager, that Trent Baalke won't be around. If that's the case, I do believe that this is a faulty process just based on that alone. So we'll have to see how it turns out. However, I did point out yesterday in the podcast yesterday that when you look at some of the names outside of Trevor Lawrence that were picked in the draft, the Jaguars did not totally whiff and miss on everyone, and they didn't. And I don't know if Trent Baalke is using that as his calling card to help save himself, or is it just that Shad Khan is just the most loyal person? I'm telling you, man, he could have been a mobster, man. Shad will ride. He will ride to the end, till the wheels fall off for his employees and his staff, even if it looks like everyone believes that they should be gone. And that's the kind of loyalty. If you want some loyalty in your life, find you somebody to hang around like Shad Khan, because he is going to be very, very loyal to you, even if you screw up. So a lot of the debate that goes on right now is whether the Jaguars should get an offensive coach as head coach or not. Matt Eberflus, I believe that's how his name is pronounced. He's the defensive coordinator for the Colts. He's getting a second interview, and everyone made a big deal out of that yesterday. Well, he's one of the only guys who they've interviewed that isn't coaching to get a second interview. So you wonder about Doug Peterson, you wonder about Jim Caldwell, because those guys are not employed either, and you haven't heard mention of those guys getting second interviews. So Bill O'Brien, you haven't heard of him getting a second interview, and I don't think you will, based on some of the things that I've heard of how that interview went. And just just to be honest about that, I don't know how anyone would really know how it went unless somebody who was in on the interview leaked it out. So, but that's been known to happen here in Jacksonville a lot. But in any event, I'm going to discuss the difference between hiring an offensive head coach and a defensive head coach, or just hiring the best head coach. And I think I think you get yourself in trouble anytime you're in a situation like this where you do one or two things. You go, well, we can't hire X because we just had Urban, and there's too much of that in the building. Urban was here for less than a year. If you allow that to affect anything that you believe might resemble being a success moving forward, then I've classified that as baggage. And you're also doing yourself a disservice. If Urban was bad, you don't allow anything that he did or did not do to affect you moving forward. You have to look at him like a bad relationship, drop it and let it go and move on and make the best sound decision you can. Don't eliminate another coach because he may have a characteristic that Urban had. So now if you're going to forget why you hired Urban Meyer in the first place because he had certain characteristics, well, then now you go looking for a new coach and you don't want that coach to have any of those characteristics. I think that's lazy. And I think what you have to do is you have to just say, no, I don't want a coach to do. Look at Urban's transgressions and say, I need a guy who I know won't do that, that, and that. Don't say I don't need a guy who's anything like him in the first place, because if that's the case, then you should have never even hired him in the first place, because most of the things that he got fired for are things that you didn't see coming. So if we're going to sit there and do that, then that's having that baggage, and you're going to reduce yourself to limiting yourself with who you're going to pick. Another thing is, I heard a lot of fans do and say this, and I've talked to people about it, and it's almost like the most ridiculous thing ever. We don't want another guy running 4-3. We don't want anybody that has anything to do with Gus Bradley. That's baggage. Because now you're eliminating D'Amico Ryans, who's a pretty good football coach, right? And to be honest, that would be assuming that all 4-3 defenses are alike. And some of these things, they take on a life for me. They take on a life of their own, and they really, really, when you talk to actual people who coach football, or it has nothing to, there's no bearing whatsoever on how the next guy decides to do his job. The defense didn't fail Jacksonville. The coaches failed Jacksonville, right? And if you have the right personnel, you can make even a bad defensive coordinator look good. Just look at 2017 with Todd Wash. Okay. So if you're going to start eliminating coaches based on certain criteria, you're going to put yourself in a very, very small window. And for a team that doesn't seem to know how to get that part of it right, why would you put yourself in a smaller box? Because you know you don't want this, you know you don't want this, you know you don't want that. When the bottom line is none of that stuff probably was what the problem is. The problem probably has been this whole time is that they've had bad leadership. Which leads us to this, and we're going to talk about this too in segment 2 and 3. Since Shad can't get this right, why do we feel like he's going to get it right this time? And what confidence do we have that he actually knows what he's doing? I can tell you right now, we don't have confidence that he's going to do it. But if you don't have confidence that he's going to do it correctly, that means that makes it more important. That makes it even more important that the hire, H-I-R-E, is so important. The higher, the H-I-G-H-E-R-E, you move up the pole. If Shad isn't the greatest owner or greatest judgment of all of this, then maybe his second in command needs to be, and that can't be Trent Baalke. And even if you're going to keep Trent Baalke, then now you're starting to, get to the point where you're skating on thin ice. So now you get down to the next guy. At the very least, you got to get the coach right. The higher up, the right part of it is, like, if you had the right owner, he's going to get the right GM, and the GM's going to hire the right coach. But if you have the wrong, not to necessarily say the wrong owner in terms of who he is as a person, but the wrong owner in terms of his ability to hire the right under the next guy and to set a course of action and to do things a certain way, then you need the better GM. The better GM is going to make that, he's going to cover up for that a little bit. But if you have a wrong GM like Trent Baalke, and I think he is the wrong GM, then you better have the right coach. You better have the right coach to at least make it look halfway decent, or get it to the point where it's going to be a little bit sustainable. So let's talk about that. If he can't get it right, Why is it so important that he gets these guys up under him correct? And what coach do I think could make all of that stuff happen? Look, we're going to do that in just a second here on a Wednesday, and I'm going to try not to cough uh, on Locked On Jaguars, man, because I'm still, it's hard to talk this long without giving it a good cough, but I'm going to give it a good try. I want to tell you about Built Bar, man. It's the new year. Same Built Bar, though. You can make New Year's resolutions all you want, but until you act on them, it doesn't matter, right? So if you want to eat a good snack, something that's healthy for you, that tastes like a candy bar without actually eating a candy bar with all of those bad things in them, Built Bar is the place for you to go because they're covered in 100% chocolate and their macros are off the chain, man. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. And they have so many flavors. It tastes so good. And they're not chalky and waxy like the other protein bars are on the market. Built Bar is actually very, very good. My favorite one is the salted caramel, but you can find out what your favorite is at built.com. Now, they have raspberry, cookies and cream, mint brownie, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, and many more. In fact, Built Bar is always coming out with new limited time flavors. So check out built.com often to see what's new. To get 15% off of your next order, go to built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15. LOCKED15 is the promo code. Built.com is where you go and you pick your favorite, and then hit me up on Twitter and tell me which one is your favorite. You know, mine is the salted caramel. All right, rolling along here on segment 2 here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Jaguars. I'm Tony Wiggins. Thanking you for making us your first listen, as usual. And we're grateful to have you here with us on Locked On Jaguars, talking about the importance of the GM and the coaching search for Jacksonville, and the importance of getting this thing right and not using predetermined rules like, well, I want an offensive guy, or I want a defensive guy, or I don't want a guy that has this characteristic. Or sometimes, man, when you've had a bad history, you have to just scrap that stuff and just, you don't want to make the same mistake twice. Like, you don't want to overlook certain things. But the one thing you don't want to do also is put yourself in a situation where you're putting yourself in a box, especially if you're not good at picking coaches and direction. And the Jaguars would now be going on their 4th coach in 10, 11 years. That will give me a little bit of an indication, or maybe a 5th coach, if you include Mike Mularkey. Yep, because Bradley, Doug Marrone, Urban Meyer, and now this will be number 5. I might qualify you for not being real good at being able to choose a leader and a direction you might want to go in. So what you have to do, I think you have to leave yourself wide open. I don't think you limit yourself to offense or defense. So you look, this is a copycat league, right? It's all about right nowism. If you look at the NFL playoffs, we've often been critical here of everybody doing the copycat thing and everybody wanting someone off the Shanahan or McVay tree. So if you're one of those guys and you go, Wig, why wouldn't you look at the playoffs? You got Green Bay, San Francisco, all right, Cincinnati. Those are all guys from that tree. Those are all guys that are doing their thing. So why wouldn't you? And then if you look at all of the remaining 8 teams, you look at Tampa, you look at the Rams, offensive coordinators, offensive head coaches. You look at the Packers. I mentioned the Packers and San Francisco, offensive coaches from that tree. You look at Cincinnati, same thing, from the same tree. You look at Tennessee, no defense. Buffalo, defense. Kansas City, of course, Andy Reid. So you have 6 out of 8 where their head coaches are offensive coaches with offensive background, and they lose people every year to the coaching cycle, and they maintain. They're still able to maintain, and that's the argument that a lot of people that make that argument have is, we get us an offensive head coach in here, and our coordinator might get poached if we're any good. Therefore, we won't have that same continuity because now you'll have a different coordinator. At least if we have a defensive head coach and our offensive coordinator gets poached. Now you're starting all over again, and he doesn't quite have that imprint. I personally have reached out to people and found out that is not how it works. It may seem like that, but that sounds good. Ain't how it goes, though. And there's another way around that, and there's examples that you can point to. One of which I'll point to right now is in Tennessee. They lose Arthur Smith, they plug another guy in, and they have all these injuries, and they still go win games. The other example is the ultimate example was Bill Belichick. You go from Charlie Weiss to Josh McDaniels to Bill O'Brien, back to Josh McDaniels. And if Josh McDaniels had gotten a job, you would have gone to Brian Daboll. And you know why they do that? Is because their offensive coordinator works with their quarterback coach. Their quarterback's coach works with their tight end coach. Their tight end coach works with their wide receivers coach. They do this, and they coach their coaches for a reason. Those guys are all one guy. And when you do it that way, that gives you a level of consistency throughout the years. There's a way that you can have like-minded coaches up and throughout your ranks. The way that you attack this is when you hire an offensive coordinator and you hire a quarterback's coach and you hire a wide receivers coach, they all got to jive and be on the same page and come from basically the same pedigree. That's how you get away from worrying about losing your offensive coordinator every year and having to change. You ain't going to have to change anything. Who says that just because your offensive coordinator gets poached, and even if you have to go hire somebody from outside of the organization, that's going to change everything that you do? Has Alabama changed? And I know it's college, but Alabama loses its offensive coordinator at least every 2 years, and it seems like they keep running the same offense. You know why? Because they do. You find people that know how to coach football, and Pittsburgh did it for a number of years. The Colts under Tony Dungy did it. They had Tom Moore. He was always there, but then they ran through Tom Moore. They had Bruce Arians. Pittsburgh did it back in the day. They did it the exact same thing. You don't necessarily have to hire an offensive coach to maintain offensive continuity, especially if that offensive coach isn't as good a candidate as a head coach as the guy you're going to pass up just because he's not offense. Now, I'm not saying don't hire an offensive coach, but what I'm telling you is I think there's an overemphasis being put on offense versus defense when what you need to do, you need to make sure you hire the right guy. And I'm really saying this too, because yesterday with the Matt Eberflus stuff coming out, people went crazy. Like, oh my God, why are we going to hire him? If he's the best coach, then hire him. I'm sorry. The thing that losing has done is it creates a bunch of irrational people. You get so tired of losing that I don't know if you almost start thinking you're outsmarting yourself, or you start really, really, really looking at everything with a microscope. And if you've never seen it, you don't know. So you got to be careful to not paint yourself and put yourself in the box that everybody else puts you in when you're trying to figure out how you're gonna get this thing right. Now, I don't want you guys to think that I'm making a case against an offensive coach. I'm just making a case against putting yourself in a box and handcuffing one of your hands behind your back and passing up a really good coach, all because he's not the sexy guy. For instance, I'll give you a perfect example. You guys would chop your left wrist off if the results that the Bills have had over the last 2 or 3 years, I told you this is what's going to happen in Jacksonville. You would. Their head coach was the defensive coach. He was the defensive coordinator in Carolina, and people thought that they were absolutely crazy when he got hired. Now look at Buffalo. And if people are going to go, yeah, but they're going to lose Brian Daboll. You know what they're going to do? They're going to find another Brian Daboll. They might even have him on the staff already. So don't get a wedgie when this coaching search is going on. If you're gonna have a problem with the fact that it's Shad that's doing it, and he don't give you the biggest track record. But my point to everybody is this: it's Shad that's doing it. Give him carte blanche as to what he can and can't. Do not put limits on him, because he is a walking limit himself, obviously, when it comes time to hiring people in football. So when you put him even in first, and you're already boxed in, I think, because Balky's a part of the process. So you don't need to further hamstring yourself when it comes to trying to look for a coach. I'm going to talk about the candidates, some of the guys and what they have to offer, and something that bothers me a little bit about this process so far. I'm going to do that for you in just a second here on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Jaguars. We'll talk about Bet Online, which Bet Online is the place for you to go. They'd like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. We're right in the middle of the playoffs right now, man, and so it's a lot of stuff out there for you. I know people that went 7 for 7 this past week, and if you go to Bet Online, you probably could have done the same thing if you paid attention, because they have a new updated desktop mobile website that you can sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code Locked On to get started. It remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And I know where you start every day. That is here with me, because you make us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars, and we are extremely grateful for that. We want to make sure that you understand that we are free on all platforms, and make sure you subscribe and like wherever you get your podcast, especially on YouTube. And everywhere else, by the way, especially everywhere. But we're on YouTube as well. Getting closer and closer to that magic number. So make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. One thing that's bothered me about the process, outside of the addition of Trent Baalke to the process, which indicates to me that there's this reluctance to totally move on, is it seems like they've kind of moved past the Jim Caldwell candidacy. And I don't necessarily like that. I think he's the kind of guy you need to really, really pick his brain. In fact, I would have loved them to say, "Hey, man, we ain't gonna give you the job, but can you help us?" And have him be a part of the process, because he brings the type of football character, and he brings the type of stability that you're looking for with Trevor. Because make no mistake about it, the reason why all of this is so critical, you're not going to screw Trevor up in 1 year. You might not even do it in 2. But you don't want to get to the point where you mess up this second hire, and now you're going to end up hiring a third guy at some point within this guy's first contract. I think this is the one that has to stick, because this is the one where there's going to be a belief system. There's going to be guys buying in. There's going to be guys that buying in and doing all of those things because they want to do it. And the other part of it is, you're not going to have another situation where somebody's going to come in here and nuke everything like Urban did in 1 year. That won't happen. The guy's going to come in here. That's why people were afraid of Bill O'Brien. They thought Bill O'Brien would come in here and immediately let you know that you don't like him. But I don't think the next guy comes in here and does that. I think the next guy that comes in here gets 2 or 3 years at least. And the thing about giving him 2 or 3 years is that puts you right up against that 5th year for Trevor. And by then you'll know whether or not Trevor's your guy, or whether he has been, if they haven't been successful, you're going to have a debate whether it's been the coach, whether it's been Lawrence, whether he's been good enough. And that's just not where you want to be. So this is like the last step you have, to me, before you get to some uncomfortable conversations about the future of the franchise, quarterback, and the future, and who we are. You have to get this right now. This is the last of last year was the first year of a golden opportunity. Okay, that year's gone. This is the second year. It's a new start. You don't get a third one with what I call a once in a generational opportunity to change this franchise. You got to get this right. You got to get this right. I don't think that it's off to the start that we all wanted and hoped, because I think what Jacksonville did is they sort of reduced themselves to where everybody else was, even though they actually had a head start. And because they had a head start, there was no reason why that they had to reduce themselves to being just like everybody else in this process. So now they're basically competing with other teams for the exact same candidates, when in my opinion, they could have had a leg up on everyone else. And the way that you have that leg up is, one, you don't have to make a fast decision, but I think you do have to get rid of Trent Baalke, and you should have done that, and you should have hired another GM. And that GM, where all of these other teams are interviewing these GM candidates along with the coaches, you're only interviewing head coaches. That puts you at a disadvantage, because if you're telling people that Trent Baalke is the GM, maybe they already made a decision they don't want to work with him. Two, if you're telling people that he's not the GM, then they may be looking at you with the serious side eye on, like, okay, well, what the hell is he doing in the interview process, and who is going to be the GM? Whereas other teams are interviewing coaches and GMs, and probably asking the coaches about these guys they're interviewing, and vice versa. So while it's the most important thing, I think, in the history of the franchise from this point forward, you're screwing it up. They're absolutely messing it up. And this is probably why people are saying, nope, we need an offensive coach or we need a defensive coach. I think people are really trying to help Shad. That's what they think. I think in the process of trying to help him, you're actually hurting the franchise when you say, well, we can't hire a coach because of this, and this. We already have let's just say Trent Baalke's presence eliminates 40% of the coaching pool. So now you've just given a guy who's not very good at hiring coaches a 60% window, or only 60% of the eligible people that's going to be out there. Well, he did it to himself with Baalke. Then if you take away guys that are defensive coaches, D'Amico Ryans, Todd Bowles, and those guys, and Matt Eberflus. So now you reduced it down to, say you take another 25%. Now 35% of the coaching pool is all that's available to you. And let's just say half of those guys choose somewhere else. They think another situation is just as good or better, or those teams move faster. So now you got 17%. You see where I'm going? That's my problem with this. There are just too many things that we're using to diminish the quality of the people who are qualified, or the people who will be guys that are looking for jobs in the NFL. And that's what's going to settle for who's left. You're going to settle for who's left. I tell you what, you don't have to settle. You don't have to settle by taking betting advice from anywhere. You just go to the Locked On Bets podcast, hosted by your boy Q and analyst Lee Sterling. They give it to you every single time. Make sure that you have all the information that you need in order for you to make your bets and maximize your potential to win you some money. So like and subscribe and follow the Locked On Bets podcast, hosted by your boy Q and analyst Lee Sterling. I appreciate you guys roughing it out with me and tuning in here to Locked On Jaguars. I am Tony Wiggins. We'll be back tomorrow, man, with some more information. Hopefully, as this weekend gets closer, I might have some breaking news if they ever decide on a coach, and we'll see. Until then, you guys keep taking care of each other, and thanks for all your well wishes while I continue to recover.